Today I want to talk about accountability, and I've called this talk Accountability to Whom. It's a topic that's been on my mind a lot this past few weeks, and we talked about it in the morning breakfast on Friday, and it's something I was listening to a podcast about as well, about the importance of accountability. So accountability is our accounting, the ability to be accountable to each other. It's how our actions are held by our whole community. So the ability to be counted upon could be called accountability. And I'll unpack that a little bit more. I was really thinking a lot about, as Buddhists, what holds us accountable. So accountability is this really nice word that when you start to push people, they it starts to unravel. People start to lose sight of what does it mean? What is accountability? And often people confuse it with responsibility. And in the middle of there, I don't know that the terms are confused, but the way that our go-to place is often shame or punishment. And I want to encourage us to take a step back from that for today. When we think about accountability, where are we in the middle of all of this? And how can we show up in a way that is full of integrity and allows us to be counted upon? How can I create an environment of accountability myself? How can I ensure that others can count upon me? So, no matter how far out we get on this, everything in Buddhism is going to come back to the refuges. I take refuge in Buddha. I take refuge in Dharma. I take refuge in Sangha. These are called the three treasures, or the triple treasure, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. When we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, what does that really mean? So I'd like to unpack that a little bit. And the other main building blocks are the Four Noble Truths and the precepts that we take, our vows for ethical living. So all of those are the foundations of accountability. They're not accountability itself, but they're the foundations. So why do we need those foundations? Because accountability can't happen without some shared understandings. So we have to agree on some shared values and shared principles by which we want to live before we can start holding each other accountable. So think of just something very simple, like say dinner time at your house. So if you are in a family, then you might have a shared agreement that dinner time happens at a certain time. Let's pick a random time. Let's say 7 p.m. So in our family, dinner time will be at 7 p.m. And depending on how many people you have in the family, that can be more and more challenging, especially if those people get older. So maybe it's okay with children. You can kind of make that go pretty easily with small children. But then those children grow up and it grows and it stretches out. Or the adults get more busy or less busy. So if you're trying to hold that time, okay, so we have an investment. Our investment is all of our time is valuable. The cook's time is valuable. The cook would like to make a delicious meal to keep everybody healthy and happy. And it would be nice if that meal could be served when it's hot and, to honor the cook's investment and effort. So when people come to that meal late, then the food gets cold and it's not quite as nice. So then what are the offshoots of that? Well, maybe the cook is sad. I worked so hard on this meal and now it's ruined. Or maybe there's not enough food for that late person who comes in. Or maybe the late person is working late and they get home and there's not enough food. Or maybe the late person just shows up and wants to eat when they want to eat. There's so many, you can see this, there was a shared agreement, and it has to be an agreement to start off with. And then there's so many variations that can come in. So of course that has a lot wider implications for us as a society. What are some of our shared agreements? Well, of course we have laws that we have mutually agreed upon as a society, either through our own agreement or through our ancestors' agreement. And we have a voting process for that. We also have shared values as a society. Sometimes those are different depending on different cultures, but we can kind of come back to some shared values. Our shared value is, it's not okay to kill somebody. Or maybe just our shared value could be, it's generally a good thing to treat others with kindness. So there's some culturally agreed upon shared values. And there are other ways that people might have shared values, maybe at your work setting. Of course, each workplace has its own ethical codes, culture, and rules. Maybe, as I mentioned, your family, maybe with your friends. So in order for a group, any group, to come together, you need to have some shared values. And accountability happens when we start to need to hold each other to those shared values, because if we don't hold each other to shared values, then those shared values start to dissipate and can become meaningless. So this is accountability. Sometimes that's uncomfortable. So come back to the dinner example. If one person is consistently late for dinner and the others are all sitting there waiting, and the food's getting cold and the cook is getting anxious, then sometimes you can feel like, okay, it's just too much trouble to say anything. But then it happens again and again, and the resentment starts to build up, right? And then it becomes a habit pattern. Oh my goodness, we don't know when this person's going to show up. And we don't know how to plan our meals. And then sometimes they don't even show up. So now I've cooked for 6 people and only 5 are here. So you can see that there starts to unravel some different implications of a lack of accountability. So that is when we have to speak up. This is how we hold each other accountable. Okay, we have a shared agreement to have dinner at 7. We need to talk about this. You've been consistently late. Let's see what we can figure out. What's going on for you? We don't have to shame somebody. You're a bad person. You're always late. We don't have to immediately punish. You're late, therefore you get no dinner. We can invite discussion. We can invite a conversation. And then based on that, still hold the agreements. So then I want to circle back to where I started, which was our shared agreements as Buddhists. And the core, the refuges, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. What are those? Buddha is the human aspects of the teachings, the people. So of course Buddha was a human person who practiced. And Buddha is also us. It's us together with all beings. Buddha is something that we understand through our own body and our own practice. It's not something that we can get from out there. It's our internalized practice when we really start to digest the teachings and drop our own ideas of the way we think things should be, then we start to have an understanding from the inside out. This is the Buddha practicing. This is us waking up to the awakened mind itself. Letting go of our story, at least our story in which we are the central character and the hero and the antagonist and every single character. So as we let go of that, then we start to wake up from the inside out. So this is Buddha. And of course, our representation is the historical Buddha. And Buddha is all beings. Dharma is the path that we have to practice with, or the teachings. So the word is literally the path. And the path has been walked by many before us. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to learn the teachings and follow the path. The teachings are freely available to us. You know, some of them come to us very naturally, and some of them are more challenging. They're right here. So we need that stability of the teachings to allow wisdom to spread out like a wide ocean. This is Dharma. It's so big. The path of all of the Buddhas and ancestors who walked before us. Not our own path alone, but the path of all Buddhist practitioners practicing together. This is our shared agreement, the path. And then Sangha are our people. Sangha represents our common values, our common practice together, each other. Sangha is when we wake up to the fact that we're not doing this on our own. I alone rely on all of you to practice. Sangha is the collective efforts of the world to wake up together, devoid of ego, letting go of the idea of an individual or separate self. Knowing that things change constantly. Understanding that nobody does this alone. And in doing so, we start to harmonize with each other. This is Sangha. Buddha, the practice internalized. Dharma, the teachings. Sangha, the community. Sometimes people want to practice leaving out one of these. And I would say that I see a lot of signs, especially in our culture in the United States. It's very individualistic here. So we often see a lack of emphasis on Sangha, on the community. You know, there's a kind of a belief we can do it on our own, and we must do it on our own. And by the way, the Buddha taught us to do that. And that's true in some respects, in that we can't do it only relying on others. But these three things must be in balance, and we cannot leave out shared accountability to each other, the accountability of the Sangha. So I've been thinking about this a lot this week as we honor the full moon ceremony. In the Buddhist tradition, monks and nuns, we renew our vows in Japanese, and we do on the full moon. And usually that's preceded by an accountability to ourselves and to the others. Okay, what do I need to apologize for that I've done recently? How do I need to come back into accountability with the community, the Sangha, with the teachings, the Dharma, and with my own vows, the Buddha? So we really kind of take stock. What have I done recently? What's going on? Is there anything I need to apologize for? Or maybe something I need to sort of refresh and put a little extra attention to. And then following that, we renew our vows each month, starting over fresh, really coming back to what we are doing and why we're practicing, and our shared agreements for how we want to practice together, our vows as Buddhists. Dogen Zenji says in the fascicle from the Shobogenzo on taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we take refuge in the Buddha because the Buddha is our great teacher. We take refuge in the Dharma because the Dharma is good medicine. And we take refuge in the Sangha because the people in the Sangha are excellent friends. So excellent friends, given that we are all in this together, how are we going to hold each other accountable? How are we going to hold ourselves accountable? How are we going to ensure that this beautiful tradition continues for the benefit of all, not the benefit of some? We have a really good motivator. We talk about this a lot in Buddhism, but this motivator is available to any human on the planet. And this motivator is the impermanence of our lives. Or another word for it is death. You know, right now we have so much death surrounding us in the world that we're very tired. And we also have this reminder of what's most important in our lives. A lot of us are returning to the most important thing for us. How are we going to be in the world? We take refuge in the three treasures because these are the final place that we return to. This is where we come back. And the fact that our life is short makes these even more important. The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So I was thinking of these, and as I was thinking of these, the triple treasure, as it's called, and I'll put them visually in front of you, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I was thinking of all the other ways that this applies in terms of accountability. So we have self, we have the path, and we have others. We have zazen, meaning our practice that we do on our own, and our practice that really of introspection ourselves. We have the guide, teachings, and we have the way that we show up in the world. If we only show up in the world without the stability of our practice, then we can get really off. We can start to lose sight of why we're doing this. And if we only do zazen, then we can forget about the benefit of the world. And if we don't have the grounding of the teachings, then we can just start to make up our own stuff. What else? We have the teacher in the community. We have the community, our friends. And we have the precepts, our vows to hold us. There's so many ways that this manifests in our life when we really start to let it unfold, when we really start to let the truth of the taking refuge in this path open. When we let it open, then the entire universe is before us. So coming back to accountability, how does this manifest this way? As I said, our shared values are our precepts, or the vows that we take. And in our society, we have many ways of expressing shared values, but we must have shared values. And it's better to be explicit about what they are, to say them out loud. You know, if you work in a company, then you have printed out, your HR department's going to print out your guidelines, if you will, your policies. These are the days you have vacations. This is what's expected of you, in order to be clear. So without these shared values, we don't know what we're accountable to. And then on a personal side, we have responsibility. Responsibility is our values from the inside out. It's what we want to do, how we want to show up in the world, our responsibility to you out here. And accountability is how our actions manifest in community with others. So as I mentioned before, the ability to be counted on. And this is our community holding us. So responsibility is ours. Accountability is the community's. And we have to, we can't have one without the other. And we can't have them without shared values. And so I mention this because, sometimes people are really reticent to say anything about accountability. And coming back just to the Sangha and the way the Sangha is, just think of the little things that we do and how meaningful that is. The little tiny things. We have a shared agreement. Maybe it's not verbalized, but you've noticed it, that when the bell rings, we start zazen. We have a shared agreement that when we sit zazen, we're silent. So if one person starts to talk in the middle of zazen, then think of how that would affect all of us. So then what would we do about it? We have a few options. One is to shame them, which I'm going to say is never a good option because it diminishes their Buddha nature. So given that this person is my precious community, how am I going to talk to them in a way that really honors them as a full human? And there are ways to do that. When you made noise in zazen, it was very disturbing. Would you mind, being quiet? Or what's going on for you? So there are ways we can talk to people about it. Another thing that we tend to do is to blame others or to say mean things about them. That person who was making all that noise during zazen, oh my goodness, they just ruined my whole zazen. Really? Did they? Who ruined your zazen? Maybe not that person over there. And if we don't say something, then we become even more responsible. But we can only be responsible for our own mind. So there's so many possibilities for what might be going on for someone. So I'm just going to say today, it's always a good idea to check it out. Rob, wow, it was really loud today. What was going on for you? Oh my goodness, I forgot to mute my Zoom, and then my dog ran through the room and knocked over a vase. Oh, I didn't know it wasn't muted. I am so sorry. So this is where I'm going with all of this. When we hold each other accountable, we give each other permission to be human beings. We give each other permission to make mistakes. We give ourselves permission to make mistakes and to repair and to come back to community. We give ourselves permission to learn from our mistakes. And this is the compost that really grows the vegetables, the flowers here, our mistakes. We must find space for learning and growth, even in the most difficult of times. We must find that space for ourselves, and we must give that space to our friends, the treasure of the Sangha. These are excellent friends for us. So excellent friends. Let's be in this together as a community, holding each other to our shared values with the nourishment of our Zazen practice and our internal reflection and the nourishment of the teachings and the path before us to guide us. We can't have one without the other. This is how we start to build a world in which our dependence on each other becomes mutually beneficial. It holds us up rather than pushes us down. As we become more accountable to each other, we can have more depth in our relationships. We can be more real. Once we pass that barrier of learning how to speak when it's difficult, we can talk about anything. And in doing so, we can even talk about our own mistakes and our own growth. And we get to learn. We get to learn about ourselves, about our relationship in the world, and about the whole universe. So I really want to encourage you in terms of accountability. Come back to the basics. What do we agree on? And as Buddhists, this is what we have. So I'm not going to say they're not the same things for every group that we're in. But I will say that I think we can find shared values, even in the most fragmented parts of our society. We can find things that we still agree on. We can find things that we care about. This week, one of my family members has been very ill. What are our shared values? In this case, love. This is somebody who has very different political views, religious views, cultural views than I do. And at the moment of death, of great illness, all of those things kind of melt away. And what's left is love. All of that stuff is irrelevant at its core. The only thing that matters is I love you. I want you to be well. I care about you. I don't want you to suffer. All the Dalai Lama is always saying. All of us want to be happy and don't want to suffer. This is our most basic shared value. Given that all of us want to be happy and don't want to suffer, how are we going to show up in the world responsibly, holding others to that shared value, and with the teachings as our guide? Thank you.